Hello and welcome to another one of our wonderful book events. My name is Ben. I am owner of our bookshop in Tring. We're talking to Sarah J. Harris and Anstey Harris. We've got them both here. Sarah, you're very well behaved. Thank you for waving. And Sarah's even got her book on show. And I'm hugely grateful to Beth once again. She's becoming a bit of a fixture in our events. Beth Morrey, author of Saving Missy, who's very kindly going to be submitting questions and wheedling out lots of information from Anstey and Sarah. So thank you all. Audience, thank you very much for joining us. Please, can you submit questions? You're as much involved as we are, frankly. So along the bottom, you'll see a Q&A function. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, that doesn't exist. You can't be involved, but you can, however, watch it with much glee. I was going to say joy. I don't know why I didn't. So thank you so much. I will be badgering you for questions, so do keep them coming. Without further ado, can I hand over to Beth Morrey.
Hi guys, I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting this Harris double whammy, and we're kind of sandwiched in between publications because Anstey's paperback was published, here it is, published last Thursday, and Sarah's One Ordinary Day at a Time is published next Thursday. So we're very hot off the press, and I'm really thrilled to be bringing my best questions. But before we get started, one of the things that I wanted to do was you're hustling authors and you're expected to retweet praise like mad. And it can be a bit embarrassing to be always bragging and puffing yourself off. So I'm just going to do it for you for 1 second. Anstey, I looked online for a couple of reviews of your book, Where We Belong, and I found this one. It's hard to know where to begin to describe a book as wonderful as this one. The story has everything: historical detail, mystery, intrigue, complicated family relationships, deception, and lots of love. Add a museum of great magnificent, and you have something very special between these pages. Leo is my new hero, which I think summed it up rather perfectly. And Sarah, for you, I found, sometimes a book comes along and you immediately click with the characters, greeting them like old friends every time you go in for another chapter. One Ordinary Day at a Time was one of those books for me. From the moment I started reading about Simon and Jodie, I fell irrevocably in love. So I think we can all agree we've got two absolute belters here. So let's get stuck in. And first, I just wanted you to, it always comes better from the author, I think. I just wanted you to sum up what your book is about, the elevator pitch for your book. And Anstey, since you were published first, do you want to go first?
And sorry, I was just muting myself because I'm camping out at my daughter's, and I've got between house sale and house purchase, and I've got some very tired grandchildren just on their way to bed. So there might be a kind of a wail. There was a loud wail then. Right, my book. It's about a woman who is at the end of her rope. She finds herself homeless with her son, Leo. And the only place that she can go is to her husband's family's museum, crumbling Victorian museum of some strange things. In America, it's called the Museum of Forgotten Memories. And I quite like that, the way that it's this whole idea that the doors have been closed and they have one summer to open up those doors and see what they find and see if they can learn to live with it.
Well, we'll dig a little deeper into that in a second. But Sarah, can you sum up One Ordinary Day at a Time? Tell us what it's about.
So my book's about Jodie Brooke, who's a homeless single mother who still dreams of studying English at Cambridge University. And she meets Simon Sparks, a damaged former child genius who was one of Cambridge's youngest students, who is now shoveling fries and burning fries at Prince Burger. And Jodie persuades very reluctant Simon to tutor her for the Cambridge exam, but he has dark secrets that can ruin both their futures.
That's brilliant. And there's two really intriguing premises, I think. And I want to kind of really take a bit of a deeper dive into both of them. But first, I'm very intrigued by the fact that I have a vested interest here, that you are both on your second books. And I was really interested in how you found both the writing and the publication process to be different second time round, or maybe you didn't. What was better? What was worse? How did you find it? Sarah, what was it like?
I guess you know more what to. I guess you know more what to expect with your second book. So you've had your debut out. So yeah, so I guess you're just that bit more. You're that bit more prepared, I think.
And the writing process. Did you think? A lot of people, when they write the first book, it's something that they've sort of spent maybe years on and had infinite time to refine. But I guess you're on a quicker schedule when you are on your second book. Did you have to write it quicker?
I'm trying to think. I think I spent about the same amount of time. I think it was about 9 months for the first draft, and then it was obviously a lot of rewriting and then the editing. So I think that was probably about the same that I spent on B. Larkham as well, actually.
Oh, right. So, I mean, it sounds like it's been quite a smooth process for you in a way, in a kind of regular rhythm to it.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, I'm very pleased for you. I didn't find quite the same. But Anstey, how about you? Did you find?
I'm with you. I'm very pleased for you, Sarah. That's nearly as slick as your pitch was.
But did you find it more difficult, less difficult, more fun, less fun?
Much more difficult. My first novel, The Truths and Triumphs of Grace Atherton, was it was an idea that had run for years. It was one of the threads for my masters in 2008, creative writing masters. I wrote a novel with two strands, a kind of two-hander, a dual narrative, and then I took the two people apart, and Grace was one of those people. She was one of those narratives. So then I took her and her story and completely changed it. But there are some elements that are the same. So, you know, that all took place from 2008 kind of onwards. You know, there are still things I'd change if I could. And then so the whole process was around probably 8 or 9 years. I mean, I'd put it away. I'd written quite a few other books in the meantime, and then, you know, kept kind of going at it, refining it, and then suddenly I was writing Where We Belong in basically a year. So and I think the thing I found the hardest was that I knew more. I understood more about what makes a good commercial premise. I understood more about what makes a sentence. And so I'd write a page, and whereas before, when I was greener, I would have let that go and thought, oh, that's a great page, I love that page. Now I'll look at it and think, nope, an editor's only going to cut that, I might as well cut it now. It's off stage, or it doesn't drive the story forward, or it doesn't develop the characters, snip. And so that took a lot longer.
Do you think that's really helpful? Because I know what you mean. You can hear the voice of your editor kind of over your shoulder, even as you're writing, in a way. And I think that is helpful in one way, but in another way, there's an unself-consciousness to the first time round. I don't know which is better. I guess you learn to live with it the further you go on.
You definitely learn a lot through the editing process. So I've definitely learned. I think you become a better writer as a result of the editing process. Definitely.
Yeah, you learn about structure, don't you, from the editing process? Yeah. That's kind of the big lesson, I think, of that thing. But of course, also on a second book, you've got help. You have got an editor, and you have got an agent, and you have got people you can go to and say, do you like this strand? Where can I go with this? You know, so in that sense, it's easier.
Yes.
You can show a section of your work, whereas when you're like for kind of Big Larkham's murder, that went on to the the slush pile. It was, you write the whole book, and then you hope that somebody will see enough in it that they will give you an offer. But the second time round, you can show samples of your chapter, so at least you know you're on the right track, rather than finishing 100,000 words and then it's like can you cut 90,000?
When you were writing your second book, how soon and how much did you show to the editor?
I think I'd shown the first 20,000 words when I got the contract, and then I don't think I showed anymore. I think I shared it with my agent. I think I definitely shared things with my agent, but I didn't share it with the editor. I don't think I shared it with Martha until I got the end of the first draft, and then there was a lot more drafts after that.
Because that's quite daunting, isn't it? I mean, when with the first book, as you say, you finished it and probably refined it yourself hundreds of times before anyone sees it, whereas second time round it goes to people in a much raw state. So yeah.
I think like the first time around you're quite naive. You write it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it a bit and you think, it's finished. And it's like, it's going to be rewritten a lot more. I'm going to read it a lot more times now.
Yes. But I think there's a freedom to that as well, isn't there? To knowing on the second book, kind of knowing you don't have to come up with what will appear in the book. You have to heap the sand into the sandbox, and then there are people to help you turn it into a castle.
You've proved yourself, haven't you? In essence, I mean, it's Beth. I mean, you've obviously got your own experiences of publishing your Saving Missy, and you're in the process of your second. I don't know where you are with your second book. Is this all ringing true with you as well?
Yeah, well, I've just delivered my second book, so that's why I'm quizzing them so hard, because I'm very interested in that process. And I think everything you've said is right, except that I find it so embarrassing to, submit something that I fear is very raw and unrefined.
Have you had feedback yet?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's done now, but I think when there's always a part of you that, however raw and unrefined it is, that thinks, oh, well, maybe they'll say this is a masterpiece that can't be improved upon and that everything about it is perfection. And then it comes back. They're not saying that. There's it's a daunting process, I think.
Yeah. It is scary being held up to scrutiny, though, isn't it? So
yeah.
It's
I mean, and you're smack bang in the middle of that now, because you're sort of just published and on the cusp of publication. It brings a whole new level of scrutiny that isn't just your editors, but the general public.
I find I'm much calmer about that this time. The first time I was checking Amazon every day, looking at all the reviews, looking on Goodreads. I just don't do that now.
That's good.
I kind of it is what it is. People will like it or they won't, and I just got on and wrote the third one. So I've just finished the third, and it doesn't get any easier.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I interviewed the author Jodie Chapman about her book Another Life, and what she said, which I thought was incredibly level-headed about the whole thing, she said that she didn't see it as her book at all, that once it was published it was launched like a ship, and she saw it off and it's theirs now. Doesn't belong to her anymore.
That's very healthy.
It is very healthy. I mean, I kind of got that she was right, but I couldn't quite get there myself. I think it's something, well, maybe by book 7 or 8 you might be
I think it's kind of a bit like kids, isn't it? On your first child, you're kind of like, oh no, should they be that color? Like, should they feel like that? And like, are they too damp? And with the second one, just kind of like, oh, I think I saw it an hour ago. It was over there.
Don't be silly, it's not broken.
Exactly. Yeah. Literally that.
A million photos of the first one and then nothing of the second.
That's a very sore subject in our house. We do not talk about that.
Oh, really?
There's photos of the oldest and photos of the youngest, and there are none of the one whose house I'm in at the moment, who's in the middle.
I also wanted to ask you about the dread question, the effects of lockdown on your writing and everything that's happened. how did you find it in terms of creativity and more practically as well?
I found it quite bad for creativity. I think it was easier in that I was having to, in lockdown, I was editing the book. But I think in terms of writing, I found it difficult to be starting. I think for authors who are starting something new, I think that was difficult, because I think you get
also you were homeschooling, Sarah.
Yeah, yes, the children are at home, but I think so much for writers, well, certainly for me, like stimulation is outside and listening to people and seeing people, and then suddenly all that kind of stimulation is taken away. I think it was hard, actually.
Yeah.
And also, like, you see this pressure on you know, like Twitter, people saying, oh, lockdown's the perfect time to write a book. I'm going to write a book in, you know, 3 weeks. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Well, when I wasn't schooling, I imagined that I would be writing, but I was actually just scrolling Twitter looking for the latest article on numbers like that.
I know, it was quite bad, wasn't it? You just got sucked into it. It was waiting for something to end that wasn't going to end. It's just
but you both got there, and I'm going to do the thing that I did warn you about. I contacted you to warn you that I was going to ask you this, because I find it an interesting exercise once a book is written to distill the book into one word, and you're only allowed one word to sum up your book. And
I found a really clever way of doing this.
Right, yes.
Hyphenating, no.
I was going to run through all of the words I didn't use.
my husband said to do that as well.
To tell you why I didn't use them. Then I thought that was cheating, so I didn't.
What did you choose in the end?
I chose honest.
Honest. Okay.
Yeah, but it was a toss-up between honest and open.
Okay, cool.
But I quite liked open, you know, open book.
Open book, yes. Open museum.
Right.
Yeah. That's scratch honest. I'm going for open.
And Sarah, what did you choose?
Friendship.
Friendship, yes.
Yeah. My husband was saying like all these words I might have used, but then chose that one. So I kind of thought, yeah, my list of about 8 words was kind of cheating.
No, it's hard, but I always like to do it because it's sort of, in the words that you reject or consider, you are kind of understanding a bit more what the book is about.
Yeah, you kind of distill it down.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was easy, then you wouldn't need the other 90,000 words, would you? So it's best that it doesn't, you know, that it's quite hard to do.
Yes. Maybe we've stumbled on something there, though. So which comes first for you both? I mean, it might not always be this case, but perhaps with these books in particular, which comes first for you? Is it a kind of plot or a hook? Is it a character? Is it one moment that kind of spirals out? What's the sort of first bit for you?
For me, it's a moment. There'll always be something that's going to happen in the middle of the novel that I know about, and everything else comes from that. So I generally know roughly where it begins, roughly what happens at the end.
Yeah.
And I know about the big reveal or twist or whatever else in the middle, and that's all I know, and the rest just happens.
And that moment in Where We Belong, are you allowed to say what that moment, or is it too much of a spoiler to say what it is?
No, it would be too much of a spoiler to say what it is, but if you open the book, I was talking to some students about the midpoint, which was not something I'd ever come across really, particularly. I've always kind of looked at a 3-act structure, and I found this idea of a 50% midpoint is quite new, but it definitely works for commercial fiction. Kind of running up to that peak of emotional temperature and then developing the impetus to slide fast down the other side. And actually, if you open the book on the central page, that is where it happens. So yeah,
right, okay,
it worked.
I'm going to go back to that and find out. I've got some candidates.
It's 367 pages. I'm now doing the maths. What's that? It's 100.
Yeah, 183 and a half.
That's clever. And Sarah, what about you? What comes first for you?
I knew the idea I had was about Simon tutoring tutoring Jodie for Cambridge, and I knew that relationship, and I knew the twist, and I knew I guess when I write it, I don't write in, I guess a bit like Anstey maybe, I don't write in chronological order, so I know the kind of key scenes. So once I start writing those key scenes, it kind of sparks my imagination more. And then I knew the opening, but always very, very early on, I did the same with B. Larkham. I knew the last page. I knew how to end the book. And I kind of find if I know the emotion that I want the reader to feel on the last page, then I know that I have to build up to that emotion throughout the book. So I just find that really helpful. So if I was starting a book, I'd feel quite, I think, insecure if I didn't know like the last sentence. Basically, I want to know the last note. I guess it's like the last note in a song. I need that note to try and build up the book to it.
I totally agree with that. Although I write so strictly chronologically that I don't even write or note a line unless it's the next line I'm writing. So I literally start at the beginning and I finish at the end, and there is no kind of messing around in the middle. But I the same. I know exactly the emotion of the last page and the kind of, and I always think I know the last line, and then the last line changes last minute. So my last line of my new book, I knew for ages and ages and ages, and I was out in the countryside on a run listening to Absolute Beginners, Bowie's Absolute Beginners, and I suddenly realised what the last line really was, and went home and changed it.
I'm always amazed by when asking that question, how people write and what their process is, because you get such different answers. But the ones that astonished me the most was Anne Cleeve's, and I've referenced this in other events. Anne Cleeve starts with a blank sheet of paper and no ideas, just sits there and then starts writing. And there's no she discovers it at the same time that the reader does, which is extraordinary, really. Beth, what about you? What's your process?
I mean, I'm quite like Anstey. Well, I'm Sarah. I have key scenes in mind. I know how it begins. I know how it ends roughly. I do write chronologically. So it's broadly speaking like that. And I don't want to plan too much. I mean, Anne Cleeve sounds like really out there. I couldn't do that. But I like a little bit of leeway, because you find surprising and authentic things happen and your characters tell you where they're going, and it might go in a different direction, which is better than the one that you might have planned. But yeah, no, I mean, doesn't Lee Child do the same thing? He used to, on the 1st of September every year, he'd write the first sentence of the new Jack Reacher novel without any clue as to where it was going.
Yeah.
For a crime writer, just sounds absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think he's done quite well, hasn't he? So
it seems to have, yeah. I think I've heard of him. But I think I like the thing I like as well about this kind of fluid, organic way of writing is, for me, there are always objects and themes that, and quite often people who crop up, and I think, oh, I don't even know why they're there, but I keep them in, and then suddenly at the end I go, oh my word, I can't believe that's completely circular. So there's loads in Where We Belong about lions, and I didn't even realize really at the beginning that Leo is a lion. That was from my subconscious rather than my conscious mind.
And I think the subconscious is working all the time, and that you just have to sort of rely on it to do things like that for you and to pull you along to a certain extent. So when you get your idea for a scene or a moment or a hook, where do you find that comes from? What are you doing? Because sometimes I go running a lot. I tend to solve plot problems on runs. And sometimes when I'm in the hairdresser, I find I'm in a slightly zen place. But where is it for you that you tend to have your best ideas or untangle that plot that's been bothering you? Where does it come from?
For me, it's when it's abstract thought, rather than like if I'm sat at my desk thinking, oh my God, I don't know, how am I going to write this synopsis, or how am I going to do it? And I'm concentrating on it, then it just won't come to me. But if I'm just I don't know, just like watching something really rubbish on television, it goes to the adverts and my mind wanders, and it's then that I get it. When I'm not actively thinking of that as the project to do, that's when I get more of the ideas, or when I'm lying in bed, which can be annoying because I have to kind of get up and write it down, because I never remember like a sentence or something in the morning, so I always try and write it down. Yeah, so it's in those times my mind gets more active, I think.
Yeah, you have to be specific with your notes, I found, because I once did that, and I woke up the next morning to find out that I'd written Nathan Trifle and had no idea what it meant.
I sometimes dream the solution to plot problems.
Ooh.
And it can either be in a parable, so it's not really my story, but it's exactly the same thing in a different way, and sometimes I actually dream the actual solution.
I dreamt lots of Be Larkham. That's where I got for Be Larkham, that's where I got the idea from. It was a dream that I had, and I wrote it down. That's what the spark of the book came from. There's a boy running across the road screaming and absolutely terrified across this dark road at night, and it kind of came from there. Like I woke up in like real sweat thinking like, what's he, like the terror on his face, like what was he so scared about?
What did he see?
What was he running from? Yeah, that's where it came from.
Was it who do we interview? It was Claire Pooley, I think, who her writing process is getting out of bed when she's still semi-asleep and plopping herself in front of a keyboard and just rambling the kind of semi-consciousness that's coming out of her head from her dreams. Which
I think those semi-conscious moments are so important to like as you come to hold on to that problem in your plot or whatever, and just let it happen, let it actually play out. But that in my book 3, the thing that was really bugging me that I couldn't fix came to me in between the lockdowns. We went to see Jesus Christ Superstar at the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. We'd seen it before, back in the old world there, and it was amazing. And they put it back on again as a kind of COVID-friendly version, COVID-safe version. And the solution to that came to me in the middle of one of the songs, because that's the thing about lockdown is so much of your inspiration comes from art galleries, theatres, cinema. It comes from, like Sarah says, completely abstract thought, but that's kind of guided into your story by your surroundings. And of course we didn't have that. There we were looking at the same.
You sat there watching an outdoor theatre performance, and you probably not got a pen and paper on you. What do? You've got to jot this right idea down.
I don't make any notes at all from start to finish. It's all in my head.
Really?
I don't keep any notes.
Oh, I always do it on my phone. I'm constantly, like even when I'm watching TV at night, I'm emailing myself constantly, and throughout the day I email myself and just send it to myself, and then I try and collate it together into like a document.
I forget what I did a minute ago, so
I forget everything in every other walk of life. Everything. My phone notes are just full of, what to eat that evening or whatever, but bits of story seem to stay.
I always thought sometimes, because I do a bit of that, and there's a sense that if I write it down as a note, I'll somehow ruin the magic, that it's there in my head, and the first time it's going to go down is in the form that it's supposed to be in. Of course it isn't, because you refine it. But I have a bit of a weird kind of sense of that
that gives it urgency, doesn't it?
Yes, and I'm never quite sure, because the trouble is, practically speaking, sometimes you have an idea and you need to remember it. But I think we are coming back to the importance of subconscious thought and abstract thought in the writing process, that you just can't really do without it. You can plan and put post-its everywhere, but you need that nugget. And I wonder, because Edna O'Brien called it the electric charge, and she wouldn't write until she'd felt that electric charge. And I don't think I'm quite so precious, but I know exactly what she meant by that. Do you feel that you you need to wait for it, or you can write your way into it, or you don't care, you'll just start?
Kind of both, isn't it?
I think so.
I feel I always, if I get to 20,000 words, and so what I'm good at is kind of making a setting with some characters in, and I send my agent all these ideas, and she goes, yeah, it's a setting with some characters in. Now what happens? And I'm like, oh, well, you know, stuff. So if I get to 20,000 words and basically all I've done is this brilliant character study and setting, then and it's not a goer, if you see what I mean. If I get past 20,000 words, then I know it's a goer. So
Yeah.
I've got loads of books on my computer that are 20,000 words long, exactly 20,000 words long, and then there just wasn't enough to them. So that electric charge didn't come.
Yes.
The thing that brought them to life, was going to bring them to life, just didn't happen.
But you mentioning the sense of place, I was quite, I was really struck by both novels having a sense of place. And with yours, it's the Hatter's Museum, but with Sarah's, I really felt Prince Burger was such a hot, I mean, it starts off
brilliant, isn't it?
In a horrendous place, and you think, God, this is just the worst. But that's not what it ends up as. And I think Prince Burger is just as sort of strong and heartfelt a tug of a sense of place as the Hatter's Museum.
Yeah, it's a sense of community, and the people in it all kind of very, very different people, but they're all from very different backgrounds, but they're all supporting each other, and everybody is kind of challenging expectations in different ways. That way, people, like the way customers treat them, have certain expectations of them, and of them, of each other. But it is a strong community that, in the end, kind of really, really helps Simon.
And I think
I was just going to say, what I really liked about that was that they're people who you see but who aren't seen in normal life. And I really, really liked the bringing that, just kind of bringing that into into the kind of public conscious. I thought it was a wonderful setting with a wonderful cast of characters.
Yeah, brilliant. I agree. And what I loved about it was that sense that when it starts off, you think it's a dive. You think there's no redeeming feature to this place. You know, what an awful place to end up, but that's not how it is at all.
No, it kind of helps Simon, and it helps Jodie as well.
Yes.
And it's kind of, yeah, it gives a support network, and actually at the beginning, like, Ed seems like a terrible boss, but actually he is trying to help his employees, and actually he is trying to develop them and trying to, you know, puts them on different workstations and things, and he supports them, and he's kind of backs them, which is kind of what you want from a boss.
Also, it gives it that fabulous rippled through comedy that you've got in it, that works so well.
Yeah,
that comes straight out of that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess there's some situations, it was just right for those kind of situations. But I've been reading online about just how dreadfully people, like the employees are treated sometimes at McDonald's, how the customers treat them. And yeah, it's just, you know, it's just horrendous, really. And yeah, it's just trying to show, people in those situations, just how, some customers are, you know, treat them appallingly, and these are, you know, every life has a value, and my characters, each of them has a value.
And they both, well, in fact, all of them get very different things from working there. Different kinds of support and different kinds of usefulness to their lives. And I think with both books, what's interesting is that you get your characters coming to these places and not liking them particularly, or not valuing them particularly. And it's the same with Cate and Hatter's Museum, that she arrives there and this is not where she wants to be. She'd rather be anywhere else. But of course, throughout the course of the book, things change, and, you know, it kind of unfurls its roots in her. Which I mean, I really like, because I think both things defy expectations in that sense.
Descriptions in the book, I thought, advances of the museum.
Gorgeous, yeah.
Really made me want to visit.
And it's based on a real place, isn't it?
It is, but in a kind of life mirroring art situation, you can't visit it at the moment because it's been closed for 2 years. It was closed for, well, they just closed it for 2 years at the beginning of COVID.
Not
So
because
it's
of
done.
another reason.
Well, they cited COVID as the reason, but everywhere else is open.
Yeah.
Has opened up again, and right from the beginning they said they were going to be closed for 2 years.
All right.
Wow. But then that echoes a really timely and very upsetting fact for museums, that it's been a horrific time for them, and just like Hatters, they're all in danger, they're losing funding. You know, it's highlights the difficulties of running a place like that, maintaining interest and maintaining the resources. I don't want to say what happened. I've got to really watch myself not to give any spoilers, because I find it very difficult. I just wanted to talk to you about research, because obviously Simon is like brain of Britain, almost literally, and his maths thing and the maths theory that he's trying to work out. How much are you a maths genius, or did you have to do a lot of research for that?
The funny thing is I'm absolutely terrible at maths, actually. Like really, really bad. So yeah, no, I had to do a lot of research for the maths, but my husband is an engineer and is extremely good at maths. So the whole with the Riemann hypothesis, when I wanted to choose one of the Millennium problems, because they have a $1 million price if you solve them. And the Riemann hypothesis is one that really spoke to me. But yeah, I had to have my husband's help because I watched all these videos of like trying to explain what it actually was. And it's like, I'm like, oh, I still can't really. So he was trying to explain, he managed to explain, like write some of the things down that I would use in the book, actually, that would get into Simon's speak. But I really enjoyed it.
In real life, has anyone solved it?
No, it was, I think it was 2 years ago, a mathematician, because I think it was when I was writing the book, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I've picked the Riemann hypothesis and somebody's going to have solved it. But he claimed to have solved it, this mathematician, but then it has to get it has to go through I can't remember the name of the institute. And they've the people who, like, it has to be reviewed by his peers and the mathematicians, and they've all it's Clay Mathematics Institute, and they've questioned it, so it hasn't been solved. So it is still.
He doesn't get his million.
No.
Or her.
He's actually died now, actually, the mathematician, but he's.
Oh.
But yeah, so it is still there to be solved, but it won't be solved by me, that's for sure. So.
Well, that's a very good piece of research then, because I just sort of assumed that you must have some
No.
genius in there.
I didn't go to Cambridge either. So I found Lucy Cavendish College. I was trying to find a mature college because Jodie is going as a mature student. Well, she wants to go as a mature student at 25, and she's from a disadvantaged background, has been through the care system, thrown out of school before she sat her A-levels. So she's not traditional background for going to Cambridge, but she really wants to go there. And so I was trying to find a college, and I was looking online, and I found Lucy Cavendish, and they were just so friendly to me and like invited me for a tour. And just when I went there, I just knew this was like the place that she would want to go. And it was just so, a woman from her background. And actually they did have somebody, when I was there was somebody who was very similar to her, had been homeless through the care system. So they do have kind of people from women, and they've opened it up to this September, I think, to all sexes. But originally it was originally a women-only college.
Oh, I didn't realise they'd open it up, because that was one of the things that one of the parallels between your two books is they're both about single mothers for different reasons, but they both explore, I mean, the tremendous difficulty of being on your own, of raising someone on your own. And I thought that was really interesting that you both had gone for that. And was that a particular story that you felt compelled to tell?
I did with Jodie. I felt like because I'm an education, a freelance education journalist, so I often write about children in the care system who are just at a massive disadvantage, and yet every year, I see these reports, more and more reports, yet nothing is done. Like, they're just written off, and it's really, I just find it really disgraceful that they're living in, like, still at the moment they're living in unregulated accommodation that's not Ofsted checked, so they could be living next to drug dealers and picked up by gangs. And it's only I think it's this September it becomes illegal for under 16s, but it's not for 16 to 18-year-olds, which is what my character is. Jodie at the time is in unregulated accommodation. So I wanted to, she's had every disadvantage thrown at her. She's been in the care system, written off by her school. Nobody believed in her. And yet she still had this burning ambition, and the librarian, one person, it just took one person to believe in her and tell her she could do it. And she just kind of clung on to that through the years and had a terrible relationship. But, you know, her son is her light in her life and wants a better life for him.
I thought those passages in that bedsit, the grotty bedsit with the mold, were really, really powerful, because it's that sense that of helplessness. There's no one to support her.
Yeah, and just the
Frustration,
Yeah, and I spoke to somebody, because for the research I spoke to somebody from shelter just about the situation she would have been in. And it is just, you know, it's just horrendous. And how do you get out of that kind of situation? And for Jodie, she has help from, she had help from the librarian at school, who kept in touch with her after she'd left school. And then she's got a very close friend. If you don't have that support mechanism, then you are really, really stuck. And you are, you know, society doesn't seem to kind of care about, you know, people who are in those situations. That's why I wanted to kind of write about it, really.
I mean, in a way, she's lucky, even though she doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like she's very lucky, but it's those small pieces of luck, the teacher and her friend.
It's having
and her own ambition and intelligence as well.
Yeah. But I remember watching it's a Stacey Dooley documentary about young homelessness, and that was just horrendous. And it was literally a conveyor belt. It was in Manchester, and like literally as soon as they hit 18, they were out on the street. And every night she was going back, but it was like a different, more and more these children, they were just children, but they'd all been in children's homes and were just ejected, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, I found it shocking, actually.
And ironically, Cambridge seems like a very well, it feels like a very elite establishment, you know, not for the likes of them, that sort of, you know, but actually the resources available somewhere like that are to be tapped into by people like Jodie. You want that money.
Because I mean, Lucy Cavendish, there's loads of bursaries that Jodie could apply for her fees. There was lots of pots of money she could get. But it's just knowing it. I guess it's for somebody in her situation, is knowing about that and having the support to go for it. If you're constantly told you can't do this and this isn't for you, and you don't know that you could get these bursaries and you could get help with and you get the help with the accommodation and all those kind of things, then it's having that knowledge and having that support. And if you don't have that knowledge and support, then I think, especially if you don't have that support, you slip through the net. Yeah.
And I think I think it's a really inspiring storyline, but also one that sheds light on something that needs, you know, it needs to be talked about, and there needs to be resources and more understanding of that situation. But Anstey, I think Cate too is in an incredibly difficult situation, because raising her son on her own with her husband having a very well, he's dead, and he's with a very dark history.
That was the thing. That was what I wanted to write about. I wanted to write about what has happened to Richard. That was kind of that, and Leo. It was very important to me that Leo had his own story arc, that he wasn't. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that Leo has a learning disability, which actually in the American version, in our version, you don't find out for about 30 pages, maybe even 50. But in the American version, you find out on page 6, because the American editors just said, no, then people aren't going to tolerate being played with like that.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it was really important to me to have somebody featured who has a learning disability, but for whom that disability is absolutely nothing to do with his story. So his story arc would be exactly the same, whether he had a learning disability or not. That it's just about him.
I liked the slight delay, because I liked being played with, and I got that sense that I was, but you know, initially I thought he was much younger, and then with some of the references I wasn't so sure, and then, you know, it's very delicately, sensitively done.
It was very hard to do, to get it right. But yeah, that, I mean, in everything I write, there's always an element of not knowing who people are. That's the thing that's important to me, is to find out kind of find it, but that I want you as a reader to make assumptions, and then I want to prove to you that you shouldn't have.
Yeah. And that whole, I mean, his whole character arc and trajectory is incredibly powerful. And again, I am not going to give any spoilers, but there is a moment towards the end of the book where Leo really comes into his own. And it's a really powerful, beautiful moment that really works because you've totally bought into him and his storyline. It's
Yeah, he did that. I didn't really know that. I certainly didn't know what he would say. That just happened while I was writing. But yeah, it's the whole kind of issue of Richard and all of that. That was that's really hard to do because that would be a massive spoiler. But that's the real thing that I kind of wanted to write about there. And it's sort of Kate's, again, helplessness, frustration, that there was nothing she could do about that situation. It's out of her hands.
Yeah. And that
almost
is the working out, the wanting to know what happened to Richard. I mean, it sounds a bit grim, really, wanting to know, but that is the thing that tugs you through the book. You know, really, really wanting to find out how it happened and why it happened. It really kind of propels you and keeps you turning the pages.
Yeah, and I think I was trying to make the point very clearly as well that all of this could be any one of us, you know, that as well was the other part of that.
I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued at the reference to alternative version for the American market, because I'm. Was the book the same name as well? Is there a?
It was different.
No, Museum of Forgotten Memories. In my first novel was about a mistress, and I was at the Truths and Triumphs of Grace Atherton, and I was trying to kind of illustrate that we make assumptions about mistresses. We never make those assumptions about the men who have mistresses. It's always her fault. It's not his fault. Poor chap. And I wanted to. My challenge to myself was to come up with a mistress who the audience would actually, or the readers would actually be sympathizing with, which I like to think that I did. So that's the idea, is kind of just turn it on its head, something that you think you thought before, and then sort of turn it round in that sense.
That brings me on to something else that I wanted to ask you both about, which is romance, because both of your books have romance in them, but not in a traditional sense and not in a straightforward sense by any means, because Anstey, you've got Kate and Richard, but you've also got Kate and Patch.
Yeah.
And
maybe Kate and Simon.
Yes, maybe. Again, I don't want to say too much about that, but and similarly, Jodie and Simon. I mean, what I liked about all those romances, and I'm using the term incredibly loosely, is how ambiguous they were, how not the one, not happily ever after, a much looser, more nuanced and layered kind of tale than straightforward, you know, she met him and then they got married.
I think that's the kind of development, isn't it, of women's fiction, or part of the development as the genre grows, is realizing that there's more than one kind of love.
Yes,
there's more than one way to have a happy ending.
I also want to leave it up to the reader to decide. So it's up to the reader to decide, you know, what happens with Jodie and Simon.
Yeah, and I have found myself writing their story further in my head. I've got my own theories about what next. But I like that in both the books, it is left kind of open to your own interpretation, but also explicitly stated that it's, you know, it isn't the be all and end all. It's not sort of happily ever after necessarily.
Yeah, and it's like this, the bond of friendship was kind of like the most important thing between them. So whatever happened, they would always have that.
Who are your influences as an author when you think about who you'd sort of like to be like, or
Before I wrote Where We Belong, just before I began, I reread Rebecca because I wanted Araminta to be as close to Danny Danvers as I could, and I wanted her to be an actual homage to Danny Danvers. So that was one direct influence on that book.
Yeah, and Araminta I thought is the perfect name. Just sometimes you can have a character in mind and then they just slot into place when you get the name. And
it was a real struggle, that name.
Think of her being anyone but Araminta.
What other names did you toy with?
Oh, I can't remember now. It's a whole book ago. But it was, yeah. And then just as I really hit on Araminta and I was really happy with it, my friend said, "Are you sure her name isn't Alan Minter?" And then that was like, it nearly ruined it.
Doesn't Leo call her Miss Minter?
Yeah, and then yes, he does call her Miss Minter. Yeah.
And Sarah, who's your influence?
I really like Rachel Joyce because I think she has such amazing characters, and they have amazing journeys, but there's always like a darker edge or a secret. I really like how she does that. I really like The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, and her latest one, Miss Benson's Beetle. I thought it was beautiful, actually, about female friendship, but it has that dark, more sinister edge to it. So I really like that kind of book.
And I think that darkness is really important, I think, for both your books, that they're both uplifting, moving, but in no way schmaltzy or sugary. There is a darkness.
Yeah,
gotta love a bit of darkness.
Yeah, quite significant darkness in both books.
Yeah.
And I think, you definitely need that, because else where's the contrast? How do you know that we've got to the end and it's good, or how do we know that something good's happened unless you've got the bad to compare it with?
Yeah, no, I do really like the darkness in it. My agent always has to kind of put a bit of a rein on me that I don't kind of like kill too many people or something. That's too many.
I think both of you got it just right, that there are some very big depths, without giving too much away, to both stories. You do need it. You need it. Otherwise, how would we know that there are beautiful moments too?
Yeah.
So Anstey, you've mentioned that you're writing book 3. What's next for both of you? What are you up to?
I've finished book 3.
This is so productive of you.
Well, actually, when you were talking about lockdown, a couple of things for me. One was I joined the London Writers Salon, that they do this writers hour 4 times a day. It's fantastic, just fantastic, where you go onto Zoom and you write for an hour with about 200 or 300 other people in Zoom, just in one big Zoom room, and you don't speak, you just write live. And I did 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock every day. And God. Sometimes I did 8 a.m. as well. And I set it in stone like a job, like I was teaching at that time, and I just had to be there. And it was absolutely brilliant, really, really brilliant.
Was there no noise at all? No one talks. No one.
There's an introduction that the host introduces the day, and then there's usually an inspirational quote or something, and then you sit and you write for 55 minutes, and then there's a little kind of chat at the end, and usually they'll ask a couple of people what they're working on, and then on a Wednesday they have the Wednesday mingle. So when you finished writing, if you want to, you stay on, and then they put everybody into random Zoom rooms of 4 or 5 people for 15 minutes, and you just talk to people, other writers all over the planet. It's fantastic. It's really great. It really worked for me.
Any celebrity writers there? Any big names?
Yeah, there are, but I guess I shouldn't really say.
No,
but there are, yeah, and I do it with a couple of friends on WhatsApp, and we all go, oh look, there's so and so. It's like we get really excited scrolling through the screens because there's usually about 7 or 8 pages of people. So before you start, you scroll all the way through to see who's there. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's fantastic.
And that did you just did book 3 doing that?
I did.
Wow.
I did. Yeah. But also I had a lot of time in lockdown because my grandchildren live 250 miles away from me, 290 miles away from me actually. So, and I see them every 2 weeks. So I'm always charging up and down, and I teach, and I was teaching from home instead of teaching in real life. So I only have to start 5 minutes before, I had loads of me time in lockdown. So I learned Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic. I learned did life drawing. I did couch to 5k, and then I did 10k and so on. Yeah, I really liked it.
Now it's all coming out. Okay, right. I put on a stone during lockdown. Sarah, what were you up to next? What's next for you?
I'm plotting out my next adult one and planning it, and I started doing the research, but I'm trying to finish before I kind of get really stuck into it. I'm writing a YA thriller. I'm just determined to finish it. It's a very, very complicated plot, and I know if I stop, if I leave it, I thought I could do 2 things at once, and I found out I can't.
Funny that.
I need to finish it. I've almost finished it. I think I'm at 7. I think today I was at 76,000 words. I think I've got like 2 or 3 chapters left for the first draft. I just want to get that done, and then I know I've got it down there that I can just go back to it and edit. But if I stop now, I will never go back and do those 2 or 3 chapters. So I have to finish it.
Well, that's quite a deviation from your.
Yeah, but I started out writing YA books, young adult books. So I had 3 young adult books published under a pseudonym. And then I just had this idea for thriller, and it's from 4 different points of view. And it was just really fun, actually. I started doing it in lockdown. It was just really fun, really fast paced, and really fun just to do something completely different, actually. So yeah, so I'm just going to finish. I'm going to finish it this week. I was determined I'm going to finish it before my book came out. And I am going to finish it. You can hold me to it. I'm going to finish it, first draft, in the next 2 days. And then I can get onto the adult. I'll have a clearer head, and then I can just get on with the adult.
Yeah,
Listen, I'm going to have to bring this to order now. I've posted the YouTube channel that this interview will go on to. Can I recommend you all follow that link and watch it? Notwithstanding, it's got 3 interviews with Rachel Joyce on it, dare I say, in various different formats, and with other authors as well. And indeed, it's got an interview with Beth Morrey, and Beth Morrey interviewing Claire Pooley, wasn't it, Claire, more recently? Yeah, it was Claire. I'm also, for the audience's sake, I'm also going to post the link to Beth's book. You can buy the book Saving Missy from us on that link. So can't recommend it highly enough. It was one of our books of the month, certainly in the early day. And Beth, well, that was well planned there, Beth, like that. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Anstey, thank you for your time, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
And thank you
for having me.
Yeah, thank you to the audience. And well, we'll do this again at some point in a physical form, I'm sure. But we've actually got our first, dare I say, physical event next week.
Oh, wow.
Which is rather exciting. So Stacey Hall's in a room with an audience. Can you imagine? Oh. So without further ado, can I thank you all? Thank you very much. And thank you to the audience all for coming. And we'll see you again another time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.